The Sustainable Dubuque Initiative uses a holistic approach to making our community sustainable. The model involves a three-part approach that looks at environmental and ecological integrity, economic prosperity, and social and cultural vibrancy. In March of 2009, a two-day workshop on low-impact development was held at the Grand River Center, which examined aspects of environmental and ecological integrity. Dean Mattoon and Andrew McDonald from the City of Dubuque Engineering Department gave a presentation on the current state of Dubuque's watersheds and streams.
I'm just going to quickly introduce our next presentation, which has been voted Best Presentation Title 2009 Little Workshop, Assessing Dubuque Streams, Car Parts, Shopping Carts, and Other Native Habitats. Dean Mattoon is an engineering technician with the City of Dubuque, and Andy McDonald is an environmental intern with the City of Dubuque working in the engineering department, and Andy's been working on a watershed assessment for the City of Dubuque. So I'll turn things over to these guys.
Thank you, Eric. Everybody hear me okay? Good? All right. Well, I just wanted to start things off by thanking Eric and Rebecca, two very, very valuable resources we had for this LID presentation. The City of Dubuque is required to put these contractor workshops on yearly as part of our MS4 permit, but I really think with the help of Rebecca and Eric, we've really stepped it up and made something really cool for Dubuque. Well, as Eric said, my name is Dean Mattoon, and I've been working with the City Engineering Department for about 7 years now. 4 of that has been under Darren with the Stormwater Program. So we're going to be talking a lot about sustainability and low-impact development today, and we're going to see a lot of really cool practices. But before we get into all that, I would just like to show you why we're doing some of those things. And Andrew and I had the great pleasure of walking all of our streams and doing this assessment, so we're going to share some of that with you today. Briefly, what we're going to go over is just what watersheds we assessed, what kind of things we tested for, the results of some of those tests, and what we can do with some of those results. So we tested the areas in the B Branch, the North Fork, and the Middle Fork Catfish Creek. You can see that most of the city resides in these 3 watersheds. The Middle Fork Catfish Creek extends quite a bit out into the county, but we stopped just east of Sipel Road where the city limits are. Okay, Andrew?
Okay, so in our 3 watersheds, we had 24 sites that we looked at for chemical analysis. We tested every 2 weeks at our 24 sites. This took place from April until October 2008. We had 6 sites in the B Branch, 7 sites in the North Fork, and 11 sites in the Middle Fork. So listed here are some of the parameters that we tested for. We used Iowa Water Protocol. And for those of you who don't know what Iowa Water is, it's a volunteer water quality monitoring group provided through the DNR. What you do is you can sign up for a class. It's like a 1 or 2 day workshop, and they certify you to become a volunteer water quality monitor, and they'll give you all your equipment just as long as you post your data on the internet. So additional tests that we did that were not Iowa Water were conductivity and ammonia. Go ahead, Dean. For the testing equipment, we primarily use test strips. They're just a basic, simple test strip that'll give you a result really quickly. We also used different methods for determining other parameters such as phosphate and dissolved oxygen. Along with the chemical assessment, this place has bugs. We did a biological assessment, which basically looked at benthic macroinvertebrates, which benthic meaning bottom-dwelling, macro meaning large, and invertebrate meaning invertebrate. Basically large or aquatic insects, basically. We tested twice for biological, and once in May, and then once again in October. What we found was all 3 good quality, poor quality, and average quality bugs in our streams. So this is representative of a good diversity of aquatic insects in our streams.
For our physical assessment sites, it wasn't really site-specific. We basically threw on chest waders and walked right down the middle of the stream, and every 500 to 700 feet took an assessment, and then whatever else we found, we'd stop and take a picture of. So actually 14 miles we walked within these 3 watersheds, late October, early November. We did walk all the streams in Dubuque, although we only did chemical and biological surveys for these 3 watersheds. So the total of all the streams we walked in 12 days was 25 miles. So it was a lot of fun, but really hard work. The physical assessments were done with a program called RASCAL, which stands for Rapid Assessment of Stream Condition Along Length. It was created by the fine folks at the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. Basically, it just takes early standard stream assessment tests and combines it with GPS technology so that we can do the actual survey computerized out in the field and pinpoint it right to an exact location. We can pop it on a map. There's no... Yeah. The equipment and software we use, really simple, just a Trimble GeoXH handheld GPS unit, digital camera, and a couple of programs from Esri, and the RASCAL program from the DNR. Not much to it. The actual physical assessment RASCAL program is broken down into 5 or 6 different components. We use 3 of them primarily, the bank erosion, points of interest, and stream assessment. The stream assessment collected data about the actual stream corridor's condition. Bank erosion collected measurements of the bank to roughly determine tons per year of sediment loss. And then points of interest, we captured everything from trash to sanitary crossings, log jams, raging bulls, you know, pretty much all those kind of things. So now for the chemical results.
Oh, it's my turn again.
Gotcha.
Okay. For the fun stuff, we're going to get into the chemical results. These are displayed on a variety of different graphs, looking at site-specific chemicals and also time series. So over time, how do these chemical parameters change? What we're trying to do is kind of look at Dubuque water quality and compare it to the state of Iowa and see where we stand in that regard. So the first one is water temperature, and I hope everybody in the back can kind of see that at least a little bit. The top graph is the B branch and all the 6 sites there. The other 2 are the North Fork, and on the next slide is the Middle Fork. These graphs represent the water temperature as a function of time, and you can tell the B branch had a little bit more variation in the water temperature in regards to the other ones, and this is primarily because the B branch has a lower flow and it's not perennial, and so the temperature kind of fluctuates. Go ahead. This is the Middle Fork of Catfish Creek. Less variable in regards to site by site. However, you can definitely tell a seasonal change in the water temperature. The averages for each of our watersheds were 61 degrees for the B branch. The North Fork was 60, and the Middle Fork had an average temperature of 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Phosphate, one of the nutrients that we, one of the nutrients that we looked at was phosphate. It's required for all life, plants and animals. There are natural sources of phosphate in rocks and soils. However, an excess of phosphate is likely due to human cause. Some sources include wastewater and septic system effluent, detergents, fertilizers, animal waste. And what this does when you have a lot of phosphate in your water, it can cause algae blooms, which lowers dissolved oxygen, which in turn can lead to fish kills. So the city of Dubuque had a medium value or a middle value of 0.2 milligrams per liter, and the state of Iowa also had a 0.2 milligram per liter median for phosphate over, theirs is over long term, ours was just 8 or 9 months. So looking at these graphs again, based on time, the B branch is more variable, however, it's quite low. One thing I want to point out here is look around June 1st, there seems to be a little spike in phosphate, and if you go to the next slide, it kind of depicts it a little better. And so I went back and I tried to figure out why we had a spike. And after looking at some rain data, we found that between, May May 29th to May 31st, there was 2.32 inches of rain that fell in Dubuque, and between June 12th and June 13th, there was 1.5 inches. So either from natural causes, when it rained, the phosphate leached from the soils, or due to human causes, when it rains, obviously phosphate gets a little bit higher. These are box plots. I'm going to make it real simple for you. They visually display the information, the distribution of the data. So looking at the 50th percentile here, this middle value tells you 50% of our values fell above that number, 50% of the values fell below that number. And using the statistics, it allows us to then look at the 90th percentile and the 10th percentile. Anything above the 90th and below the 10th we consider to be an outlier, which is just something that's different, or it's kind of an anomaly. It's distant from the rest of the data set. So looking at chloride, using box plots, the B branch is on the left here in this cluster, and for some reason North Fork's in the middle, and the middle Fork's on the right, just to make it more confusing for you guys, I guess. But the first box plot in each cluster represents the most upstream site in that watershed. The last box plot in each cluster represents the most downstream site in that watershed. So chloride, some of the sources are, there's chloride found naturally in rocks, agricultural runoff, urban runoff like road salt, industrial wastewater. So for the city of Dubuque, we had a median value of 106 milligrams per liter. The state of Iowa recorded a median value or a middle value of 23 milligrams per liter. Statewide, it tends to be a little lower, and I think in the city of Dubuque, it's more urban than the rest of the state. Therefore, the concentration would go up a little bit. The North Fork and B branch are obviously higher in concentration of chloride. One interesting thing, if you kind of look at these right here in the Middle Fork, they're quite lower than the downstream sites, and that's because when you look at the land use, the Middle Fork, the upstream sites are more rural, or less developed, I should say. As you go downstream, you go more into the city of Dubuque and impervious surfaces increase, and so that's where we see that shift from low to high. Connectivity, there's another boo-boo, I guess. Yeah, this is supposed to be a graph here, but connectivities, it's found in the natural geology of the watershed. It could also be caused from industrial discharges, low flow period, and urban runoff. The city of Dubuque had a median value of 764, while the state had a lower value of 620. And anything above 1,500 is considered to be a reading of concern. And we did have one site in particular, this site right here, it's near Bergfeld Pond, if any of you are familiar with that area. And this site is a little higher, I think, because the outfall that we were testing at is right below Bergfeld Pond, so it's not necessarily a stream, it's receiving water from the pond, so therefore it's a little higher, I think, due to that. And typically in the nation, we find 50 to 1,500 is standard, so we're right in the middle there. And there's the connectivity meter. Dissolved oxygen is obviously needed for all aquatic life. This graph depicts the averages in our three watersheds. So this is the B branch, the North Fork is in red, and the Middle Fork is in yellow. So we had a median value of 8 milligrams per liter for dissolved oxygen. The state had a little higher, about 9.75, between April and November of 2000-2004, between the same time as our sampling period. There's one thing to note, the state of Iowa does have a water quality standard for dissolved oxygen of 5 milligrams per liter for warm water streams. And so this next chart here kind of looks at the percentage of our samples that violated this dissolved oxygen standard of 5 milligrams per liter. So the B branch, our last site, the North Fork, our first site, and then North Fork, our second site, they violated this 5 milligram per liter standard at least some percentage of the time. This site right here violated it 20% of the time, and that's the headwater, the most headwater site of the North Fork, and it doesn't usually receive a lot of flow, and when it does, it's from stormwater, so I think part of that is because it's kind of intermittent in that area. pH is a looks at the acid-base content in the water. It scales from 0 to 14 on the pH scale. Iowa streams typically run between 8 and 8.4. The city of Dubuque had a value of 8, the middle value, and the state 8.3, so pretty close to the state average there. And this is probably due to, we have a limestone geology around here, so that carries a little bit of a higher pH value with it. Nitrate is also an essential nutrient for plants and animals like phosphate. Just like phosphate, it can lead, an excess can lead to algae blooms and fish kills. Some sources are industrial discharge, animal manure storage areas, and runoff from fertilized lawns and croplands. The city of Dubuque concentrations were quite low. What we found was they had a median value of 1 milligram per liter, while the state had about 5.25. And again, I think the state samples more out in rural areas where ag comes into play, and the city is obviously, there's not a lot of ag around, within the city of Dubuque. We also measured for nitrite, which is inorganic nitrogen. However, 98% of our samples were 0, so I didn't even bother putting them on a graph. I'd just rather tell you. The USGS did a study from 92 to, I believe, 98, and the lower 48 states looking at land use and nitrate concentrations. They looked at farmlands, forests, and urban land uses, and they found that in urban areas, 81.6% of the streams tested were at less than 2 milligrams per liter for nitrate. 18.4 were between 2 and 6. And I kind of related that to the Dubuque data that we got, and we're less, or 69% of our samples were less than 2 parts per million. 31% were between 2 and 6, so kind of similar results there. I want to make a note that the 31% of our samples between 2 and 6, all 31% of that was 2 milligrams per liter. We didn't have anything above 2. And there is a drinking water standard for nitrate in the state of Iowa that's 10 parts per million, or milligrams per liter. Transparency. This is a measure of water clarity. It's obviously affected by sediment, rainfall, runoff, stuff like that. And I wanted to show here how rain affects transparency. And so what I did was I plotted our transparency on the top graph here and our rain data down here for the different months. And you can tell the transparency is the highest when it doesn't rain. However, when it starts raining, that water clarity goes down. That's just a general trend that we found. It applies some of the time, or most of the time, but not always all the time. We did note any rainfall in the last 24 hours prior to sampling, so that's where we got that data from. Some future goals for the chemical assessment. Obviously, we'd like to continue monitoring for these parameters, possibly introduce some E. coli tests to quantify bacteria levels in our urban streams. That'd be kind of interesting to see where they're at and how they apply to the state bacteria levels standards. Analyze the data from a micro watershed approach, which Dean will kind of touch on a little bit later, which is pretty interesting. And implement some BMPs and monitor how water quality changes, if at all. So quickly, I'm just going to touch on the biological results. We sampled in riffles, runs, and pools in our streams in a variety of microhabitats, including log jams, root wads, rocks, fallen trees. The Bee Branch, we found 18 species of aquatic bugs. In the North Fork, 15, and the Middle Fork, 13, and we sampled twice a year, or twice last year. So some future goals for the biological assessment or biological survey would be to continue monitoring twice a year at least to see where we stand as far as any change that we see. Possibly perform a BIBI, which is a benthic index for biological integrity. It's basically a scientific tool that allows you to look at water pollution as it relates to what you find for aquatic bugs. Possibly implement a fish survey to see what the fish community is like in our streams, and over time implement some BMPs and see how, if at all, these diversities of fish and aquatic insects changes with the implementation of BMPs such as stream bank stabilization. And I'll turn it over to Dean again.
Thank you for doing that, Andrew.
Here's your clicker, it works.
I didn't want to. All right, so for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show data for the North Fork watershed on our physical results. That way I can zoom in on the map a little more, kind of describe the certain tests that we performed. So you can see we assessed 31 sites within the North Fork Basin. Assessments were taken roughly 500 to 700 feet apart, or whenever there was a drastic change in stream conditions. If you can't read the diagram on the left, it shows all the areas of the stream corridor that we looked at and recorded. These fields all have to do with the stream condition only, such as canopy cover, riparian zones, bank stabilization, bank material, substrate material, number of pools, number of riffles, if there was habitat. We logged 92 points of interest within this watershed. And again, this is anything and everything that comes into contact with the stream corridor. So out of the 92 points of interest we had, 11 were bridge or culvert crossings. 21 were debris piles or log jams. 36 were outfalls into the stream, and 3 major trash collections. The rest were miscellaneous items, most of which were illicit discharges from raking leaves or grass clippings into the stream. We had 13 areas where we logged major erosion on the bank. Now these are areas where we felt there was the most erosion coming off the banks. Most of the streams in all 3 watersheds at some point had no material on the banks. It was just open soil, but these were really looking like they were giving off a lot of erosion. So we logged the length and the height and how severe we felt the erosion was coming off as a good rough estimate of how many tons per year sediment we're losing into the streams. So now as we start to analyze the data, we can take apart the pieces that we collected and create custom maps based on the specific items we want to focus on. For instance, in this slide, we took all the data referring to log jams, debris piles, and trash, and now we can start to create a stream cleanup program based on this data by looking at locations where the most trash is, and then breaking it down into parcel locations, how we can get into the stream, how we'd store the trash as an intermediate, and things like that. So here what we did was we just laid the bank erosion locations on a line of the stream that represents bank height. So the erosion starts to occur a little more frequently as you get downstream. And then in this slide we added all the outfalls, which is a real good indication of why the bank heights are getting so tall. So I'm going to go back one here. But most of the water that we walked through on all 3 watersheds rarely went over our head. Just a few pools, and towards the end of the Catfish Creek itself, it was too deep to walk in. But it was interesting to see that it was still maybe up to our knees, even down where there were 6 to 10 foot bank heights. And then to think in a summer rain, those just completely fill up. It's pretty amazing. So as we look at this to a micro watershed approach, we can get a little more intense with our watershed analysis. So we break them into micro watersheds or sub watersheds. We can then start to create small projects within the sub watershed at a smaller scale and be able to effectively measure the results of our restoration practices. There are many restoration practices we can do to decrease water quantity while increasing the quality. Retrofits for existing commercial practices such as detention basins and drainage swales. Residential practices such as rain barrels, rain gardens, green roofs. Municipal practices, we can retrofit catch basins to allow infiltration. The monitoring becomes real easy at this point. With 1 or 2 outlets into the stream, you can easily measure flow rates and chemical tests for improvement. So the future goals for the City of Dubuque, now that we have all this data, excuse me, we're going to focus primarily on stream cleanup projects this summer. So I would encourage anyone that's interested, and we have had plenty of calls of citizens that want to help out. So if anybody is interested in helping out with stream cleanups, please contact me or Andrew or Darren. We can get your contact information. The city currently has a stream bank stabilization program in place. We talked a little bit about it yesterday. And this just helps citizens with material costs for improving the waterways within their properties. And we're also looking into a similar program based on low-impact development that would provide materials for rain gardens and providing rain barrels at low cost to citizens. And other projects may include restorations or retrofits to all of our existing detention basins that we have. All right, Andrew?
All right. So what we did, just to kind of figure out how people use their streams and how they value their streams, was we sent out a survey or a stormwater brochure, and just by a show of hands, how many people received that in Dubuque? Did anybody? Okay, a few people. And I don't want my heart broke, so I'm not going to ask how many people returned that survey. But we sent out 21,000 to the residents of Dubuque. So far, we've gotten 350 back. Just 5-question survey, and I'm just going to run through those real quick and give you some of the answers that we received. So the first question was, how do you use the creek in your watershed? Some people fished, 12.5% hiked, but most of the people, 73%, said they don't use the creek at all. Others were they use crawdads for bait, dog swim, or general recreation in their streams. Second question, do you think it's important to maintain the quality of water in Dubuque streams? 96% of people said yes, it was, which is good. And most people, very few people said no, and some people weren't sure. But a lot of the comments I got on that were, yeah, it's very important, and we need to improve them as well. Do you believe your day-to-day actions affect the water quality of Dubuque streams? 75% of the people said yes, 14 said no, and 11 weren't sure if their day-to-day actions affect the quality or the water quality of Dubuque streams. One person commented and said, I reduced runoff by ponding water on my land. Fourth question was, and I think this is the most interesting question, what do you believe contributes most to stormwater pollution in Dubuque? 5% said wastewater treatment plant, 17.8% said factories and industries. Most people said, or I guess a majority said stormwater runoff. Sewage overflows was at 15% and ag runoff was about 25%. Some other comments that I got were 16 million pigs in Iowa, dumping in drains, careless disposal of automobile oils and greases, and a good one that I thought was overtreatment of urban lawns for weed and growth control. The last question we asked was, how concerned are you about stream pollution in Dubuque specifically? 56% of the people said they were very concerned, 37% said they were somewhat concerned, and those are the majority. Some people said they weren't concerned or they weren't sure. So just additional comments that I wrote down. Somebody said, bummer I had to return this cool info to do the survey. People need to be informed and educated. And finally, please don't raise our water bill. So,
All right. So now as we finish our presentation, we'd just like to take you on a little trip down our streams here in Dubuque. There were many good and some not so good locations within our streams, but now we have the information needed to concentrate on those not so nice aspects. We had a lot of fun doing these assessments, and the folks here in Dubuque are really fortunate to have some really beautiful places right within the city. So again, please get a hold of us if you're interested in helping out in any way, whether that be stream cleanups, illicit discharge monitoring, and water testing or anything like that. So enjoy the scenery. you very much. So anybody have any questions? You, sir?
This is for Andy. Looking at your chloride measurements, it looks like in the city limits, the chloride measurements are a whole order of magnitude higher than what the state average is.
Sure.
Have you compared that to other urban areas?
No, I have not. I just specifically looked at the state of Iowa to kind of get a relationship between where Dubuque stands. I can definitely look into that and talk to Rebecca, maybe Amy, and see what their chloride levels are down there, and then definitely get back to you about that.
Be interesting to see.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. And the white. Sure, to answer the first part of your question, the state of Iowa, the median values for the state, in my comparison to Dubuque averages or medians, the parameters that I tested for are just very basic parameters, and the concentrations within those parameters were, they weren't bad. I'm not going to say they're good, but they're not bad. As far as the setting a limit, the more monitoring we do, the more likely we'll have a better understanding of where our range is for Dubuque area. So the more, we can't just go out there and say 50, let's shoot for 50, if we don't even know what it is to begin with. So the more monitoring we do, the more we'll have a better understanding of what our actual range is with these parameters. So I think if we continue to monitor, we'll get a better understanding of that.
Yeah, we can do all that with the just from the stream assessments alone, the data that we collected. When we first got the data back, we just played with it for the whole day, making different maps. Trash locations, where would stream cleanups be best? And if they're residents' property or whether they're the city's property, and we can start to really come up with a couple good programs based on this data. In the residential areas, we can work on rain gardens and rain barrels, and all the commercial sites, might be able to retrofit their detention basins. And
Would you have like a prioritized list of things that would be have the best measurable impact if they were restored?
We don't yet, no. We're really in the initial phases of our complete watershed assessment program. We're just gathering data at this point and starting to do something with it. So we're thinking about this micro watershed approach, using that as a base, for a couple simple tests, and then we'll be able to determine within the city of Dubuque what works best for us, a couple small tests, and then we can implement a full-blown program. So.
Well, the only chemical I tested for that is on the state impairment, or not impairment, but is water quality standard, is dissolved oxygen. So, a percentage of the time our waters didn't meet that level. So I guess I'd classify it as impaired, but not every time you go out there is it like that. And it's not a full-blown water body. Those sites were coming from storm sewers, so when it rains, they fill up with water. I don't think so. And chloride, I don't think there's a standard out there yet. There's a drinking water standard of 250 milligrams per liter. But for aquatic life, I think they're still kind of debating that, and it's around, I think the chronic criterion is around 460 milligrams per liter maximum for chronic. I think the acute's around 800. I know Rebecca's just going to answer my question right now.
Oh, as far as the further watershed study with the WMPI? Do you want me to just explain what I've done with it?
Well, and the goal is to be able to have that prioritization.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah, the whole prioritization index basically comes now after we've got some initial data and we start to look at hot spots and categorize and, put a rating on parcels that need the work the most. So, Darren, back to you. I think we're in a good spot right now. We do have some problems in our streams, but I don't think we're on an irreparable track here. I think we can do a lot and really make some good streams.
Sure.
Yeah. The question was about the outfalls that we saw in the slideshow. Most of them were either undermined or coming apart. I think what we saw was right in the North Fork Basin, and that is scheduled for a complete overhaul. So, but to really answer your question, it is a problem with undermining, and I don't know if there's a way dumping into a stream like that, ultimately we just wouldn't want to dump into a stream. We want to have low impact development and restoration practices, but the thing I've seen the most is riprap, water channel going down a riprapped hill. It never seems to work. But yeah, the question was regarding catch basin inserts and what we can do on our entire storm sewer network, and we have talked about that. Just doing 2 or 3 of them as a test in different areas of the city and seeing, how long are these going to go before we have to empty them out, or are they really effective? What are we reducing? So we'll be able to do some simple tests like that. And also there's a good retrofit on a catch basin where they actually either plant a tree or they do some infiltration and they take out some of the chemicals in the trash before moving on down the line. So yeah, we're looking into a couple of those things. You, sir? There was one person that I ran into down by that detention basin that was monitoring some time ago, but I don't think he is anymore. So. Oh, you have? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's in the city limits.
Well, down by the pond behind the industrial center, we do one test. When Granger Creek comes into the city limits, we do one test there. But yeah, and we're working on trying to get a group of people together, those of you that are interested in testing for water quality, to get Iowa Water certified so we can have people out there doing some more. Any other questions? The question had to do with easements along the streams where we were. Yeah, there's along most of our streams there is a sanitary sewer easement for our gravity sewers. What was the first part of the question?
What is the most impacted areas that you found?
Oh, the most impacted areas had to be the North Fork because it's the most urbanized.
Who owns, so it's pretty much residential?
Residential, yeah. And the Middle Fork was interesting because it paralleled the railroad tracks through town. So a lot of that was just woods and pastures and railroad tracks. And the South Fork was primarily rural ag land. Yeah, so the North Fork was probably, I'd say, the most impacted just due to you have that many outfalls. It's a residential area and there's streets everywhere and you're dumping it in the stream, so. All right, well, thank you guys very much. Oh,
One more.
Yeah, very much.
I think sometime down in the future, down the road here, we might want to look at that. Right now, we're just basically gathering our data. We're in basically step 1. So we're just trying to see what we found and then look for areas to apply these best management practices. Stream bank stabilization doesn't have to be ugly. You can make it look nice. So we're focusing on some of that stuff in the future.
One of the things I noticed was a lot of the fallen trees I thought were bad, but it's really good for aquatic life and for benthic macroinvertebrates. So I was a little misguided when we started looking at all the data. I thought, wow, this is really bad, but it really wasn't. Some major log jams that needed to be taken care of. But. All right, well, thank you guys very much.